more time the choirs for being here with us. You did a phenomenal job. Thank you so much. Anybody do any deer hunting this year? Anybody kill a deer with a gun? Anybody kill a deer with a bow? Anybody kill a deer with a car? Okay. They say that driving is the most inefficient way to deer hunt. When I was a kid, see, now they have really, if you're really into deer hunting, you can get quite a bit of money soaked into the equipment. You've got all kinds of camouflage, but even the tracking stuff. You can get cameras that you set up in the forest. You ever seen these? And you can track the deer. It'll take pictures. You can get their routes and everything and kind of technologicalize how they go. But when I was a kid, we didn't have that kind of stuff, and my dad hunted deer a lot. So we would walk through the forest. And when we walked through the forest, I would be looking around at the forest, but then my dad would stop and he'd say, come here, and we'd look at this small tree, and there was some bark scraped off of it, and he would tell me that this is what's called a buck rub. And so I learned about what that meant, and the bucks, when they get to about that time of year, they'll start rubbing onto trees to scrape the velvet off of their antlers, but it's also a good indication of the route that the deer take when they walk. And depending on which direction the rub is, you can probably determine which direction they were coming at night, because they usually do that at night. And so we learned to scout and track and follow deer, and then set up a deer stand at the best place and shoot deer. I'm not a big deer hunter these days, but if I had been by myself in the woods, I probably would have noticed the squirrels running up the trees and the beautiful clouds and everything else, and walked right by those signs of the deer. As I got older, I started learning to pay more attention to the signs in nature, especially as I began hiking more. A couple years ago, I was backpacking in Wyoming, and we were backpacking in a beautiful river gorge. Mountains all around, great time of year, except at this time of year, there were a lot of aggressive bears in that area. Aggressive grizzlies is not a great match for unarmed hikers. So we were really careful. This time I was looking for signs everywhere of anything that would have been aggressive grizzly, especially any carcasses, because they're really territorial. Even if you walk by a carcass, you can be really territorial and incite a bear's anger. So we were watching carefully, and one night when we got up after camping out there, we looked around and realized there are huge bear paw prints all around our campsite. And on a big pole tree was massive scrapes and scratches, and we realized, man, we just slept in prime bear territory. Then as we got walking, we saw like a carcass with a little bit of fur left on it. We thought, this is not good news. Let's get out of here as quickly as possible. We learned to read the signs. Here's the point. Just like my dad was able to see the signs in the trail for the deer, and I learned to watch and see the signs on the ground for the bears, God gives signs of his presence to people who are looking. This is such an unusual story in Matthew 2. The wise men coming, and we're so familiar with it that we often don't stop to think how strange this little section is. Who were these wise men? How did they know to come to this location? What a strange encounter they must have had, because in Judea, where Jesus was born, they had the whole religious system going. I mean, everybody in that area would have studied the scriptures. They would have known the prophecies, memorized the prophecies about the coming Savior. Everybody in that area would have been kind of more close to home and recognizing what was going on. But here are these guys from a very distant land that travel all this way to meet Jesus. Now, some translations of the Bible call them wise men, or sometimes we call them three kings, which some of the legends have given more detail than the Bible actually does. The Bible, if you look at what the word describes, it's Magi. Magi doesn't say how many of them, but these were guys, they weren't kings, but they were kind of like royal advisors. Magi were really smart. They were really educated. They were almost like presidential cabinet members. They would advise the rulers or kings of other lands And they studied not only philosophy and law and science, they studied everything about spirituality. These were kind of the spiritual gurus of their society as well. So they were very respected people, very smart people, very wise people. But they looked at the stars to see what the future held and what the heavens were saying to the earth. One day when they looked at the stars, they saw an unusual sign. We don't really know what the star looked like over Bethlehem. We don't know a whole lot of detail of how they knew that this was the King of the Jews, but something in what they saw stirred them to the point that they actually got up and here's what I want you to notice. They did not see the sign and say, "Amazing, it's time. Let's go out to dinner after work to celebrate before we go home. We have found the star of the King of the Jews." They didn't see the sign and say, "Aren't we smart? Because we, among all the people, have recognized the sign of the King of the Jews." They saw the star, and they actually got up from where they were, and they left, and they searched for Jesus. Hundreds of miles on foot till they found him. My guess is something that was happening out there was stirring and speaking with something that was happening in here. When they got to the place where they found Jesus, such a humble little place, such a humble little family, but they had the sight, the spiritual insight to see that this baby was the king. And what did they do? This is astounding too, because if you look at all of the people in the religious institutions around them, they did not see Jesus for who he was. Most of them missed it. At least many of them missed it his whole life. They never saw who he was. But here are these people from distant lands. They saw the sign. They came. They bowed the knee. They worshiped Jesus. They gave him their best gifts. There was something in the air around that time, not just in Judea, but just something in the climate of that whole region. In fact, you might say the whole world, that they were just expecting something. There was a climate of anticipation. Even people who were not Jewish people, there were other historians that wrote about this. A Roman historian, Suetonius, said that at that very time, there was a spread across the Orient, an old and established belief that it was fated that men from Judea would come to rule the world. Another Roman historian, not even people associated with Jesus, said that there was a firm persuasion that a king from Judea would acquire a universal throne. People were looking for something to happen on a world scale. In fact, about the same time of Jesus, Caesar Augustus came into power. And when Caesar Augustus came into power, people would go and they would actually shout the gospel of Caesar. Caesar is here. Caesar is king. Caesar is called, that he called himself the savior of the world. History proved out that he wasn't. And history proved out that the political improvements of the Roman Empire and the road systems they developed were good, but it didn't fix the brokenness underneath the system of the world. It was only the Magi who saw the sign, who came and saw Jesus and caught a glimpse of the prophecies that were fulfilled. Here's what I think has happened in our recent history. A few hundred years ago in Europe, many of the descendants of where some of us came from, there was an age of enlightenment. You may have studied this in history class. In the age of enlightenment, really smart people got together and they said, we're tired of all of these superstitions and we're tired of having the church kind of run the show and looking to the Bible. We need to displace the Bible, push that to the margins, and move into the center, science and philosophy. And so science and human knowledge began to reshape the way people saw the world. They made huge advancements. They made incredible thought developments in the Enlightenment. And following shortly after the Enlightenment was the age of industry, the Industrial Revolution. And that's when people got together and they built things that had never been built before. Huge factories were built, jobs were created, they laid roadways all across the country, and they built thousands of cars to put on the roadways. Just incredible development, developed weapons of war like never before. And then shortly after that age was the age of technology. And the age of technology put a device in every hand, or should I say back pocket. The age of technology gave us information, unbelievable access to anything we want to know, anytime we want to know it. It connected people through media like they've never been connected before. The age of technology transferred wisdom into knowledge that was dispersed everywhere. And yet, after all of these experiences, we still have not fooled ourselves at the end of the day. There is part of our hunger, a climate of expectancy that I sense in our society, similar to the society of the Magi. A hunger for something that is not being fulfilled. Science, for what it has done to illuminate the world and change the world for the better, it has shown us that it has not fixed the darkness of our own souls. And while thanking God for the gifts of technology and cell phones and appliances and washing machines, we're thankful for that in our family. Dishwashers, before we had one, I was the dishwasher sometimes. And gifts of advancement, cars, planes, everything that we have, we've come to realize that these gifts only cause a deeper hunger for God. And the more we try to fill the soul with the gifts, the more our hunger craves God himself. Our society has worn itself out, looking to politician after politician to save the world. Our society has worn itself out to find our meaning and worth from other people's opinions and other people's affirmations and casual romantic relationships and the temporary distraction of drugs and alcohol. We're tired of, as a society, empty religious tradition, as Paul would say, that has sort of a form of godliness but without the power. We don't want to be told that we're not good enough and that we need to do more and give more without being told how. We don't want to be tied to a tradition that is empty and simply rehearses the past without giving us a clear picture of the future hope and the power to live a passionate, purposeful life today. We don't want to be cogs in the machinery of the religious institution. There are so many in our society that have long since stopped going to church, reading the Bible, to find the hunger, and yet the hunger remains. And God is still giving signs of his presence to those who are looking. The question is, how do you respond? See, I believe that there are a few here today who you would probably describe yourself as kind of distant from God. Or at least you wouldn't describe yourself as close to God. And you might kind of feel like the Magi who were off in a distant place doing your own thing, but yet God is bringing signs into your life that you can't ignore for very long. And it may not even be in a direction that he usually does. He might be finding them where you are already looking and bringing you signs of his presence. And maybe nobody else knows what they are or what they mean. Maybe they're just for you. You have to walk in your shoes to understand that God is giving you indications of his presence and he's trying to help you search for him. I've had a bunch of these throughout my life that I recognize. Maybe nobody else would have found meaning in them. But I realized God was trying to connect. Sometimes it was through nature. Sometimes it was through songs. Sometimes it was through a movie. Sometimes it was through a poem. Sometimes it was through somebody else, a random conversation that the person had no idea that they were speaking for God at that moment. Sometimes it was through a picture or a voice. Sometimes it was through hearing somebody preach. Sometimes it was through all kinds of methods that really, unless you were me, you wouldn't realize. And I bet for some, if you're feeling like you've been distant, God has been bringing signs of his presence. question is, how will you respond? Are you going to respond like the deer, where you see the signs and you track and you follow and you search until you find God, and then when you find him and you connect, then you continue to follow him and stay on his pattern? Or will you respond like the signs of the grizzly and run in the other direction as fast as possible because you do not want to encounter God? If God has been speaking to you, my guess is there's something out there, coincidences that are stirring and speaking to something in here. And he wants you to search because he loves you. Because he knows that the hunger that you're feeling will never be filled by any of those other things. And he wants you to come to him. And when you come to him, just like these outsider Magi did, bow the knee and give him the greatest gift you could, which is your life and your heart. This is the relationship that you were meant for, that your whole life revolves around, that without it, there might be signs, but the signs are not the important thing. It's the fact that God is drawing you to Jesus. And if you search and find him, then life begins in a whole new way. I'm going to light the Advent candles here to close. And this is kind of a tradition around Christmas time. The first three are where we are today. This is week number 3. The first one and the second one we've already done. But week 3 today is the candle of joy. It's the joy that Mary felt when she heard that she was going to have Jesus. It's the joy that the shepherds felt when the angel showed up at their job site and started singing. It's the joy that the Magi felt when they finally found the end of their search and they saw Jesus face to face. They didn't rely on just other people's words. They came to him and they met him in person. It's the joy that you and I feel when we do the same. I want to take just a moment of quiet. We do this every week with our Advent candle. Just a moment of quiet to allow you to listen to how God is speaking. We'll close in song together, and then I'll give you a couple instructions from there. I'm going to dismiss very differently today than we normally do. Usually we leave on kind of a high energetic note and send you into the world to make a difference in the world. But today I'm going to dismiss you quietly. And I'm so glad you're here, and I just want to send you with the joy of Jesus if you need to go that way. But if you need to come this way, there are some that I think God is speaking to your heart and your life, and he's given you the signs. He's already established what he's trying to do. It's just now you to take a step and respond. Search for him. So if that's you, then don't go that way. Come this way. And somebody would love to pray with you, or nobody needs to pray with you at all. Just pray by yourself and just come up and kneel here and talk to God, because he's here. And he wants you to know how much he loves you. It doesn't matter if you've been here for 50 years and God is speaking, come and pray. It doesn't matter if this is your very first time here. Choir, Thomas gave permission. If you feel the need to come and pray, you're free to do that as well. So I just want to dismiss you quietly. If you need to go that way, go ahead and do so now. If you'd like to come this way, come and pray, and somebody will pray with you if you want.